At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneers' initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
I'm back from the break.
In the mood for some coffee.
Me too.
I know, right?
Yeah, I'm about out.
I should get a case of it and just keep it here.
Oh, Charlie, you can't drink
people.
that. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I've been
It
drinking
goes against the sponsorship rule we have.
Oh,
Hey.
well, I can hold it. Well, no, I can't. It's got McAfee all over it.
Didn't that stand for Matt and Calorie Cafe?
Yeah, right. Matt Cal MC
yeah,
Cafe.
Yeah.
All right, don't worry. Nobody's going to see that. I'm going to cut that part out.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Oh, hello everybody and welcome to this episode of Ask a Gettysburg Guide, Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. I don't know why I always forget the name of the actual show, but whatever. And today we're talking about Archer's Brigade. And Archer's Brigade, of course, early on in the battle there, and a lot of fun things happen with them. And we're going to do something fun today. We have with us a patron, a very good patron, by the way, a very loyal patron, and one who is great with a phone call just to check in, see how everything's going, talk me off of many ledges, and also offer legal advice when possible or whatever. He's a great guy. He's become a friend, actually, and he has become somewhat of an expert on Archer's Brigade, and we're going to find out how and why. But his name, and you know his name. You know his name because he often calls in or writes in with questions. But most importantly, you know his name because of his famous grandmother, Rue. It's the great Matt McClanahan. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
And in the words of my grandma, thank you for being a friend. I really appreciate that.
I love how you play along with that because it's not actually his grandmother.
Rue McClanahan is not no relation. I know.
Which is a shame.
I would be glad to claim her.
Sure.
She's also a Southerner like myself.
Exactly.
You know?
Sure.
And you wouldn't have minded getting some of that McClanahan fortune, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
And of course, sitting here with us is Charlie Fennell, who needs no introduction because he's a staple on this show and everybody loves Charlie.
And I got my picture in the post office so they could see it there.
Hey, speaking of Charlie pictures, hold on now, Mike. Don't go to the computer yet. So one of our patrons, I guess, knew you from West Virginia when you taught there.
Okay,
does that sound right?
Is that right?
And he sent.
Wow, I hair then.
If you want to look up at the monitor there, Mike will go to the thing, and there's Charlie.
Hey,
That's me.
That's
look at
young
that handsome
Charlie.
devil.
That's the salt and pepper days.
It
right?
was, yeah. That's before kids.
How old were you there?
Probably in my early 30s.
Early 30s.
Yeah,
It's
probably
early
30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your hair was going gray pretty early, huh?
Yeah, I had gray hair in high school. Mini skirts did it. Yeah, it was too much for me to bear sometimes. You know?
Oh, that's fantastic.
But they bared it all.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, that's Charlie's young picture there. I didn't do that to embarrass you. I just wanted to.
That's good.
One of the listeners remember you. I think it was Matthew Gillespie. Do you know that name?
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go.
Good guy.
Yeah. There you go. That was from Matt.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Got a lot of Matts here.
Yeah, you only have to know one name.
Surrounded by Matt.
Mess around. I feel like Custer.
What's that old joke about Custer?
Which one?
He goes, I don't understand it. Last night at the ball, them Indians seemed fine, or something like that. I don't remember what it was. It's a Dean Martin thing.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, we're going to get to Archer's Brigade now. Now, before we do, though, Matt.
Yes.
Why Archer's Brigade? Do you have a relative who fought in Archer's Brigade?
Yeah, so for a few reasons. So actually, the 7th Tennessee Infantry, which is part of Archer's Brigade, it was organized in Sumner, Smith, Wilson counties in Middle Tennessee. And that's where my side of the family is from, my father's side of the family. So there's a James William McClanahan that fights in the 7th Tennessee Infantry. So I've got a collateral descendant connection there, and I'm a native Tennessean, so I am naturally interested in Tennessee's participation in the Battle of Gettysburg. So I've really enjoyed learning about Archer's Brigade, and I think they tell a very poignant story with the Battle of Gettysburg. They're there at the very beginning, and they're there at the very end. So they form a bookend to the battle, with Tennesseans being there on the very first day on July 1, and then, of course, being there at Pickett's Charge at the end. So I think that there's so many interesting stories and so many interesting first-person accounts that come from Archer's Brigade, and I've just been naturally drawn to it for a number of reasons.
And so what type of research, like, are you trying to write a book or something, or you just wanted to learn more about Archer's Brigade and you started looking into it?
Yeah, I just wanted to learn more about it, and I've kicked around potentially doing an article and maybe submitting it to some sort of online blog or maybe some sort of historical journal, but really just enjoyed the personal stories and just from my own research and understanding of the battle.
All right. Well, then let's get into it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Why don't you give us, start where you want to start.
So I think it's important. I think Tennessee, when you think about the Battle of Gettysburg, is maybe not a state that you necessarily initially think of, because we're in the Eastern Theater of the War. Most Tennessee units are going to be fighting in the Western Theater of the War. So an initial question is, well, how did these guys get here? And really, even before that, how did Tennessee wind up in this conflict? And I think a lot of students of the war may or may not realize is that Tennessee is a very divided state prior to the American Civil War, and the decision to even join the Confederacy was one that was hotly debated.
Yeah, they were like the last state to join, right?
Last state to join the Confederacy, first state to come back into the Union. And
last out, first in.
Exactly right. Yes, sir. And it's related.
I remembered that for the guide exam. They didn't ask it, but I remembered that.
You should have just written it on there. I know. Just put that in there.
Yeah. By the way, I know that Tennessee was the first, or last out.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of give you a little background information. Whenever the secession crisis happens. So Tennessee actually holds a referendum in February of 1961 about whether or not they're even going to call a conference to discuss Tennessee, potentially seceding from the Union. And not only is the convention shot down by a statewide voter referendum, but the candidates or the delegates that would attend that convention are all Unionist delegates. And some of those delegates that are elected to that are people that eventually are going to populate the Confederate Army, and I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But one of the leaders of the Unionist sentiment in Tennessee in that time period is a guy named Robert Hatton, who is going to be the commander of what becomes Archer's Brigade until he's killed on the peninsula. So Tennessee has this referendum in February of 1961. This is after the Deep South southern states, the 7 states that initially secede from the Union, have already voted to secede. Tennessee says, no, we don't want to join the Union. April of 1961 comes, and of course that's with the firing on Fort Sumter. Lincoln calls for 75,000 volunteers, and at that point, the sentiment in the Upper South begins to change. And while Tennesseans were on the fence prior to the firing on Fort Sumter, they have to make a decision about what's going to happen at this point. And in June of 1861, they hold another referendum on secession. And at that point, the state of Tennessee votes to secede from the Union mostly. East Tennessee still remains loyal to the Union. Now, when I talk about East Tennessee, that is what part of the state's basically on the eastern time zone. So there's the Cumberland Plateau that divides that third of the state. You go east, go up towards Knoxville, Bristol, that portion. You have small farms. You have individuals where they don't really have a financial connection to slavery. It's mostly yeoman, working class, type individuals. So there's not this great desire to secede from the Union. That's where the Whig Party mostly has sway in that area, with some exceptions. Not a strong Democratic Party presence in the eastern Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, larger scale agriculture, more of a slave-based economy. By June of 1861, they decide that they're going to leave the Union. They vote overwhelmingly to secede from the Union. Tennessee does. They form their own state for a minute before then deciding that they're going to join with the Southern Confederacy. And at that point, these units begin to form. The 3 that we're going to talk about today with Archer's Brigade is the 1st Tennessee Tourneys. There's also a 1st Tennessee Mannies, which fights in the Western Theater. There's the 7th Tennessee, which is made up of men from Sumner, Wilson, Smith counties. Those are counties outside of the Nashville area. And then the men of the 14th Tennessee Infantry, they're made up of men from Montgomery County in that area. And you would probably recognize Montgomery County in Clarksville, Tennessee today because of its military connection with Fort Campbell. That's where the 101st Airborne Division is.
Okay.
So all these units come together, and they are organized in the Tennessee Provisional Army. They get the call that they're going to be transferred in 61. They're going to be transferred to the Eastern Theater, and they are moved, and they fight with Lee in West Virginia, and they're under Stonewall Jackson's command for a moment, and then eventually they're transferred out to the peninsula where they take part in that. Robert Hatton is elected as the commander of the brigade. They select him. Robert Hatton's from Lebanon, Tennessee. If you go to Lebanon, Tennessee, there's a statue of him still on the courthouse square there, and he's known as the reluctant rebel, because he votes against secession prior to this, but decides to join after.
And he's voted commander of the brigade?
He's elected as, or selected, I should say, as the commander of the brigade
By
the Confederate authorities.
Okay.
so anyway, he's approved by the Confederate Congress and everything. Idea being that you want someone who is from the state that is going to be made up of the regiments from that state. So if you have a brigade filled with North Carolina units, you want to have a North Carolinian, lead that unit. Robert Hatton is named as the brigadier general for that. He's killed on May the 31st, 1862, the Battle of Fair Oaks or Seven Pines. And after that, they have to select a new person, and they don't go to someone from Tennessee. They don't even go from someone from Alabama. The 5th Alabama is going to also be a part of this brigade that we're going to talk about. And they select a Marylander, Mr. James J. Archer, to command this brigade. And he's going to lead the brigade through the Battle of Gettysburg. Of course, spoiler alert, he's going to get captured on July 1. But James J. Archer comes from good military stock. He's one of his families, some of the founding families in Maryland, and he had won the confidence of the Confederate hierarchy. He actually served as, whenever he was engaged in a duel in Texas, and he has a duel with what would later become a Union Army commander, Andrew Porter. And whenever you have a duel, you have a second. And James J. Archer's second was none other than a guy from West Virginia, Thomas Jonathan Jackson. You'll know him as Stonewall. So anyway, and he's going to serve under Stonewall for a brief moment.
So how does Archer get the job as the brigade commander? Is he in the brigade at all?
He's not in the brigade at all. So he's actually commanding a Texas regiment at the time, and the Texas men really don't like Archer. They think that he's a little too. Maybe too strict, I guess would be a good way, Charlie, to say that. That he's just
a martinet.
Yeah. That's right, exactly. So they don't
disciplinarian.
And they just don't really care for him. There's a little bit of some suspicion, I think, from troops from the Upper South. Whenever you read a lot of the correspondence from the Confederate hierarchy, because they're a little bit late to the party, there's a question of how sold out are these guys really, for the cause?
Right,
are they going to desert? Do we need to make sure that we, maybe keep an extra eye on them? So I think they select Archer for that reason. It's like, well, these Tennessee guys, maybe they're not as hardcore as we would like for them to be. So we're going to maybe put somebody over them that's going to really make them
a guy from Maryland that's which is split,
which didn't even join the Confederacy, right?
Tennessee.
Exactly. So, but he does an excellent job. The men come to love Archer, and they have a lot of confidence with him, and they know a lot of success, of course, with Lee during the Second Manassas campaign, and they're part of that tide that stems that Union assault at the Battle of Antietam or Sharpsburg. They fight with A.P. Hill's division at Sharpsburg or Antietam, and then whenever Hill gets tapped for Corps Command prior to the Gettysburg campaign, they get transferred to Henry Heath's division, and it is that division that they're marching with on July 1, 1863. So
they're first in line, right, in Heath's division in his line of march, and so they're the 30th though. They're camped just west of Marsh Creek, right, and they've got their picket line and everything like that, and they're aware they can see Buford's cavalry, can't they? I mean, from where they are, they can see.
They know that there's some sort of Union Army presence in front of them. I mean, now obviously they've been given orders, the famous orders, don't bring on a general engagement.
Right. Yeah.
So they've thrown out pickets. At first, they think it's just cavalry, which does not worry them. And then they think, well, maybe it's just militia, maybe it's some Pennsylvania reserves that are being brought up, that they're not concerned that it's the actual Army of the Potomac. But as they engage with Buford's men, they know that regular Union soldiers are being brought up shortly from that. And that's when they begin to have the altercation with what is the Iron Brigade, eventually with Union First Corps.
So like Pettigrew goes in on the 30th.
Right.
And he sees Buford's men coming up and turns around, goes back, reports to Heath, here's what I saw. Hill comes up and they tell Hill, and Hill's like, nah, just talk to Lee. They're not even anywhere near us, go on in, whatever. Does Pettigrew ever talk to Archer knowing that he's the lead brigade? Because didn't they switch orders or order in line because Pettigrew was first, but then the next day Archer had to go up, so Pettigrew goes back. Was there ever a conversation that we're aware of between those two?
Pettigrew tried to explain the terrain to him and to watch out for a certain lane on your right that you have to be aware of. Pettigrew's staff officer, Young, also tried to explain it to Archer, and, you better be careful when you get down that road. And he said, nah, there's nothing to worry about. So he just sort of nonchalantly passed off the advice. And I think it was Pettigrew called it the spirit of disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like was said here, Hill had just gone to Lee. And Lee gave no intimation the Union Army was anywhere in the vicinity. Mm-hmm. So what you got in front of you, all they saw were cavalry, or like Matt said, militia. And you know what they're good at?
Yeah, nothing.
Running.
Right.
All right. And this is something you got to understand, because when they advanced down the road, they had the artillery in the front. That's not standard operating procedure.
Right.
But what they're trying to do, if there's militia out there, they fire a few rounds and they get out of the way.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's not what happened. Right.
So, that's interesting, though, because as I understand it, Pettigrew and his staff, as they're watching Buford come up, they can see the way they march, the flags, the number of them. They have to be able to see, because they're coming up the Emmitsburg Road, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, from the seminary, they can, you can't see it today, but back then you can see all the way to the Emmitsburg Road, because it was nothing but farms and no trees and no buildings. So they had to know that So I would imagine, I guess not. If I were Pettigrew, I'd be screaming.
In addition, Charlie, and maybe I'm wrong about who it was, but didn't some of Davis's men bump into, was it Gambler Devon just north of Fairfield as well?
Yes. But some of Davis's brigade, was it Davis or Brockenbragg?
I think
went in
with
Pettigrew on June 30th.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there was some action over Fairfield.
Right, so it's an approaching column. It's not stationary troops.
And Buford was upset that the people wouldn't tell him that the Confederates were there, because if he knew they were there, he could have planned better and maybe captured a regiment or two.
Right.
And one was the 21st Mississippi, I think was there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I'm not going to tell him. Yankees always lose.
Right.
They're going to run away, and now, you're the guy that told them.
Yeah.
Right. So there's just
and I've always thought maybe that Adams County citizens, or this section of Pennsylvania, they're a little more ambivalent than there's a strong Democratic Party presence. I'm not saying that they were secessionists by any means, but I don't know that they were necessarily sold out for the Northern cause, to the point where they were going to, I'm going to risk my family's life to tell John Buford where Lee's army is,
Yeah. And also, I from a lot of the Confederates were kind of disgusted by the German portion of the population here.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't seem to care who won the war, just leave me alone.
100%.
Stay out of my field.
Yeah, stay out of my field, right?
We got the perfect good road here. Why don't you use it?
Right. And there's that one story that Alexander tells about the German who's freaking out because there's mud on his porch and they tapped his well and his front lawn is all torn up. And he's talking about the horrors of war. And it's I've heard about the horrors of war, but I never thought it would be anything like this. That's crazy. But yeah, and and this isn't a knock against anybody, but even today there's sort of this kind of there is a laid back kind of attitude around here, and you can always tell whose family's been here a long time versus who's a transplant, because the attitudes towards things are different. The attitude towards money, towards business, towards just all different things. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think of that, Charlie? What Matt's saying about the people here being kind of ambivalent?
Well, I think they're taking care of themselves.
Yeah,
and they're farmers. Mostly their economic lifeline is to Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
So they have southern connections, southern, acquaintances, business partners, whatever. And so, if you work too hard for the Union, you might lose those connections.
Right.
And furthermore, they're Germans.
But then
for the most part.
Then if you work too hard for the Confederacy, you might lose the protection of the Union.
Yeah. But they're hardworking, thrifty, terribly, frugal.
Right.
Frugal, that's a good
frugal
word.
People.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that causes them to be more concerned about their property, their animals, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Than it would be about some concept of the United States or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
not that some of the Germans didn't fight, but
Sure.
But here in Adams County, it was more ambivalent, I think.
And there's also that example of that woman, I forget who exactly, it might be Hill's men, that she encounters, and she shouts to them that they're on for a world of hurt. And one of the guys asks why, and she says, because you put your faith in Robert E. Lee and not the Lord Almighty or something like that,
Right.
And so there are people that are kind of like trying to like stick it to them the best they can.
Sure.
And there could be, just remember, 4 days prior, a Confederate column did come through Gettysburg, and it was scary, and they did say they would be back, and they had a series of, this is what we want. So maybe there could have been that fear factor too.
Yeah, I think
no doubt.
The population was somewhat cowed by the advancing. Confederates got here first.
Yeah.
Where's the Union?
Right.
We're supposed to be protected.
Yeah, so I'm sure like that would kind of be disheartening that your own guys aren't even here to protect you.
And certainly they heard about the Confederate Army, how successful it is.
Right.
And they've probably heard some of the stories about Union troops, not behaving themselves in Virginia.
Right.
So they were concerned about what these guys are going to
come back,
be like when they come through here.
It's got to be scary.
Yeah, I wouldn't provoke them.
No.
They want to knock my fence down, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true or not, but there was a story I heard that one of the boys, it was either a McCreary or a McCready or a Mc who was ever, one of the little Mick boys.
There's a lot of mix around.
The McClanahan.
That's exactly right. Sounds like an Irish law firm. McCready, McClanahan, and McNair.
McNair. Yeah. Right.
There you go.
But it was during the 26th as White's cavalry is coming through, and they're like up on Seminary Ridge, about to fully enter the town. And this kid had a little makeshift cannon he made out of a gas pipe, and he shot it off. And all the adult men who were in the crowd, once they heard that, they were like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Like they're afraid of retribution or something. Yeah. All right, so let's get back to the whole thing there. So let's start July 1st.
Okay.
They wake up, they start moving in. Go ahead, take it away, boys.
Okay. Well, Archer's going to lead the division. Supposedly Hill's going to get those shoes. Right. That's what he said the day before. We don't have that many shoes. The troops that went through in 4 days before took what they could find. But anyhow, he orders a whole division to advance. He gets 2 battalions of artillery to accompany him. What's he doing?
Yeah.
I think he's trying to figure out what's in front of him.
Right.
And if he has trouble, he has enough to handle it.
But why? What you mentioned before that the artillery is leading.
Well, he suspects that maybe it's just militia. They've run into him before. Yeah. And if you fire a few rounds, these guys, they run.
Right.
Well, but does the artillery, did they send at least a company ahead with the artillery? Do they have any protection?
Well, probably skirmishers.
Okay. So there is some infantry at the head.
But the Confederates really are kind of strange here, because when Alexander goes around on July 2nd, he's leading the column, right? And he sits there for over an hour waiting for the infantry.
With no support,
So I think it was fairly common here when they come into Pennsylvania, either they're overconfident or the people they're running into are not worthy.
Yeah.
So you fire a few rounds and they're gone. Yeah. And I think that's why they came in. And Archer, when he starts, the first shot's fired, of course, as we know, at 7:30 on the morning of July the 1st. It's fired by a lieutenant by name Marcellus Jones from Milton, Illinois. And he had been feeding his horse when he heard from Sergeant Schaefer, it looks like the Confederates coming down the road. Now, that would be Chambersburg Pike. So he rides out and looks. And sure enough, here they come. So he borrowed Sergeant Schaefer's carbine because lieutenants never have what they need when they need it.
He pulled rank on the poor sergeant.
He did. And so he fired the first shot. Now, I always ask people on my tours if I mention this story. I said, did he hit anything? And the answer is no, he's a lieutenant. Okay. But he did fire the first shot, and that seemed to suggest all of a sudden there's people in front of us that are willing to contest our advance. We don't know how many, who they are specifically, but we better start taking precautions. And that forces Archer to go in the lines. Yeah, forms the lines. Yeah. And Davis is right behind him. Now, one thing you got to understand, Heath's division, this is the first battle I think they fight together.
It is. Yep.
Yeah, because when Lee reorganized the army, Hill commanded the Light Division, which was very famous, very good. Yeah. Okay. And Archer and Brockenbrough were in the Light Division. Okay. So that's the base.
The nucleus.
The nucleus, if you will, the experience part of it. And then you had Davis to it, and you had Pettigrew. Davis, of course, he wasn't with the Army for a long time. And Pettigrew, he was in the Peninsula.
He was.
Yeah, so he hasn't been back. Yeah. Who are you? Where have you been all this time?
Davis owes his position to a little nepotism, probably.
That's what they say. He is an uncle. We all do. But anyway, these guys are coming down the road, and what do they have? They have 1,198 men because they've been shot to pieces in the beginning of the war. I mean, Archer's brigade has never been defeated. Never been defeated. And as Matt alluded to, they've served with distinction on every battlefield they fought on. We look at them as kind of idiots here, because they walk in there and get caught in a trap. But this is the first time they actually were defeated.
Right.
Okay. And so they're pushing the cavalry back, and the cavalry's retreating. You don't stand it. And what I understand is that the cavalry weapon doesn't have range.
Right.
Right.
Okay. It has frequency of fire,
right,
but not range. So the infantry gets online. They're 200 yards out. You can't hit them, but boy, they can blow you apart.
Right.
And so they just keep retreating. And Archer's men, and it's hot. I mean, get up early.
Yeah.
To make this move. It's like, they get up 4 o'clock in the morning, get formed up, and so start moving in.
I think they were on the road by 5 or 5:30.
I think it was 5. Yeah, 5:30.
Daybreak, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Buford's, he's trading space for time. It's obviously an organized withdrawal. And and that's the benefit that cavalry has is that flexibility. They can mount up, ride out, form another skirmish line. You have all these thousands of infantrymen. It's going to take them a while to come online, get reformed, and it's going to delay until Reynolds can eventually show up. And building off what you said, Charlie, about these new divisions. So Heath's a new division commander. Right. Hill's a new corps commander. This is both of their first big battles.
Right.
Lee writes a letter prior to the Battle of Gettysburg. Famously, he says, I believe my army can accomplish anything if properly led.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's a very important preposition.
Yeah.
And Gettysburg's going to really put that to the test. Or were they properly led here at the Battle of Gettysburg?
Well, and you had mentioned before that we kind of look at them, what did you say, as idiots here or something, something like that. But if I recall, Heath orders Archer forward, and Archer says we're too light of a brigade to go into the unknown, and he says go anyway.
Right.
And so Archer did try to be smart about it, but he was misled. He was told to do something and
following orders.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And is it also true that as they go in, and we're saying we're west of Willoughby Run, as they're going across, and then they hit Willoughby Run, they're not all like in a cohesive line. There's kind of space between them, or is that after they hit the quarry?
No, the two regiments on the left got ahead.
They got ahead.
Yeah. They got ahead.
Okay.
And they were ahead. They crossed the run before what was the right? It was the 13th Alabama, 1st Tennessee, I think.
So I think it's the 14th Tennessee and the 5th Alabama Battalion, I believe.
Well,
I could be telling you wrong.
Yeah.
I'll look it up while you're talking. Go ahead.
But there's that space between the regiment basically gets bifurcated because you've got the rock quarry, you have this uneven ground, and then you get into Willoughby's Run, which obviously you have this waterway that runs through it. So it's hard to keep that unit cohesion as they're going through that area and then up into what we would call Herbst Woods.
And then as soon as they cross, they run into the 2nd Wisconsin.
That's exactly right. So so by this point, the Iron Brigades come up. So the 1st Corps is online. Reynolds is on the battlefield. And the Iron Brigade's probably one of the best brigades, if not the best, in the Army of the Potomac. And they're here, and they have now run into some stiff resistance at this point with the Iron Brigade, and they're not online. There's not a whole lot of communication from one end of the brigade to the other, and those flanks being open caused them a lot of concern.
They didn't have anything.
A lot of minute
to the right south of the line. They didn't know.
Yeah. So you got the 5th Alabama Battalion is the skirmish line,
right?
And then you have the 7th Tennessee, 14th Tennessee. This is left to right. 1st Tennessee and 13th Alabama.
13th Alabama. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. And when they hit the 2 Tennessee regiments on the left, okay, they're going up against the 2nd Wisconsin, and the regiments on the right see that. Well, they do. Yeah, they will end the flank.
100%.
Yeah, knowing 19th Indiana's coming up, says 24th Michigan.
Right. So in other words, they're going to flank their enemy, and then their enemy flanks them.
Yeah, and so if you go out there today, a lot of things have changed, of course, as we know. Too many trees, too many buildings, too many automobiles, too many traffic signs.
Right.
But you drive, what is that, Meredith? There's a Stone. I always get them.
Stone.
Yeah, you go drive it, and you're coming up to the stop sign. Look how far you got to go before you know there's any cars parked in the Lutheran Seminary parking lot.
Yeah.
You're almost to the stop sign.
Yeah.
They had no clue
what was back there,
what was coming.
Right. I think it turns to Meredith once you go into the woods, doesn't it?
I think, yeah.
Stone on the straightaway, and then Meredith when it turns into where Meredith was.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Look that up, Mikey.
Yeah.
He's not going to look it up.
He's not. I think he fell asleep.
He's curled up in a ball on the floor.
Yeah. So they just had no clue, and they were warned about that by Pettigrew. Look out for your right, and they didn't listen to him.
Yeah. So, So, okay, so they get flanked. Then what?
So, of course, they fall back in confusion. There's, take significant casualties as they form. They go back to Willoughby's Run, try to reform. In the midst of all this, of course, Archer's in the middle of it. He's trying to keep the units together. He's trying to advance, and he sees that disaster is looming. So he turns around and runs. He tries to go into a thicket. His brother's also with him, who's an aide de camp. That's exactly what he said. It probably sounded something pretty similar to that.
What's going on?
Exactly. So he runs into this thicket. He's trying to get cover, trying to keep in contact with his soldiers. And I believe Patrick Maloney from the 2nd Wisconsin,
that's right,
maybe notices some gold on this jacket of this guy that's running into this thicket. He goes in and he captures, for the first time during the war, a general officer in the Army of Northern Virginia gets captured, and it's Brigadier General James J. Archer, and is captured there in the thicket by this private from Wisconsin.
So among many other firsts that happen here at Gettysburg, one of them is that Lee loses his first general to capture.
Yes,
here.
That's correct.
Plenty of Union generals have been captured before.
He didn't even lose any in West Virginia.
No. He'd
like to.
Yeah.
Like Wise, for example.
Yeah, he probably want to give a few away for sure. Funny story, whenever Archer gets captured, he's taken behind Union lines at this point. Now, again, Doubleday, of course, is on the field. Now, Doubleday and, Abner Doubleday and James J. Archer, friends from before the war, old Army buddies. And Doubleday says, well, Archer, it's good to see you. I'm glad to see you after all these years. And he says, well, you're a whole lot more excited to see me than I am to see you. He uses some other words in there as well, basically.
Not glad to see you at all.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't glad to see him at all. Of course, he knows where he's headed. He's headed to a Union POW camp.
Sure.
But anyway, that's kind of funny.
Wasn't there some kind of exchange when he was originally captured and the lieutenant, I believe, asked for his sword?
Yes.
What was that?
Well, the lieutenant wants a sword. He's not willing to give it.
Just simply
well, he's a lieutenant.
Because he's a lower rank.
Yeah. Eventually, he was persuaded. I don't think he gave it to the lieutenant.
He didn't. No.
Yeah, he gave it to a higher ranking officer.
For some reason, I think it's a colonel, but I could be.
Yeah, I thought it was a colonel.
Yeah. Mikey, did you find out about the road?
Oh, I mean, I looked on the NPS. NPS lists it as Stone-Meredith.
Yeah, right. That's
Stone Meredith. Okay.
Which I'm guessing that's what it is, because they do differentiate between like Cross, Brook, and De Trobriand Avenue as 3 different parts of the same road. So I'm guessing it is Stone Meredith.
Okay. Got it. All right.
One of those hyphenated names.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a feminist road that got married.
Yes.
All right. So continue.
So Archer gets captured at this point. Obviously, brigade's in confusion. They're having to reform. Burkett Fry is eventually going to take command of the brigade, and he's going to command the brigade for the remainder of
Burkett Fry commands what prior to the brigade?
He is a regimental commander. I think he's the 7th Tennessee. Or is it, I believe. I could be.
I wrote it down because he's a good West Virginia boy. You got to get it right. Yeah, he was in it's a 7th Tennessee.
So he's the colonel of the 7th Tennessee Infantry Regiment, and then of course because Archer's down, then he is
I am colonel of the 13th Alabama.
Oh, is he 13th? You're right.
Yeah,
what am I saying? This is my Tennessee bias.
Really. Everything's Tennessee.
I keep forgetting about that. That's right. I never give Alabama the credit they're due. That's it.
That's all right.
That's right. Exactly. No, they do get short shrift, sort of, from me anyway, because they're in a Tennessee brigade. But Fry takes over at this point. They reform their lines. Again, more Confederate soldiers are coming onto the field at this point.
So, okay. So before we go further, in this first action, this is also when Reynolds gets killed,
and most likely is killed by a soldier in Archer's brigade. We believe.
So, do you have any thoughts as to which of Archer's units?
Go ahead, Charlie.
I don't know. Everybody claims to shoot a general.
Right.
I see the general fall. I'm the one that shot him.
I did it, yeah.
I will tell you this, John Burns didn't shoot him. There's a rumor going around that John Burns fires one shot and down goes Reynolds. And that's not true.
That can't be.
That can't be.
No.
So I don't think it's a sharpshooter.
I agree with that.
I don't think it's a guy from, the Hers Ridge in a cherry tree. Mm-hmm. How can you see into the woods with all the smoke?
But that's what the movie depicts.
Yeah.
Well, sure. Every general's killed by. Yeah. And I don't think, what is Pegram? Pegram claims one of his shells hit him.
Right.
Okay. Pegram can't see.
Right.
He's nearsighted. Okay. So I think you're right. I think it's a guy from Archer's brigade, and they're just firing into the line, and a bullet hits Reynolds in the back of the head.
Yeah.
I don't even know if he's targeted.
I agree with Charlie. So my theory is this. So you're talking about how the land sort of undulates up, where the Reynolds marker is now. It's on the backside of Herp's Woods, where the modern day road comes through. It's a lot higher elevation than as you go slow as it slopes down to Willoughby's Run. I don't think it's an intentional shot at all.
No.
I think it's probably an overshot.
Yeah.
Reynolds is on horseback. It's probably some Alabama or Tennessee infantryman on that right side of the line.
It's Tennessee guy.
You think it's Tennessee guy for sure?
No doubt. Those guys are good shots.
No doubt. So but honestly, the units are so commingled and there's so much confusion in the woods. The guy that killed him probably never even knew that he killed him. Honestly,
did any of Archer's men get out of the woods where, like in the air, like how it's open where Reynolds was shot?
I don't think it got that far up.
Right. So it has to be like they're in the woods. It's an errant shot. It's a freak shot. Yeah. But it's just wasn't intended. I never thought it was intended.
And I don't remember who did the study, Matt, but there was someone that talked about how when Reynolds is killed and that charge is happening, at the same time, there's Davis's men that are in the railroad cut.
Right.
And if you stand there today, it's very possible it could have been a spent ball or an errant shot coming from that railroad cut, against, either the New Yorkers or the Wisconsin troops that are taking that flanking fire, that could have done it as well. So that's another theory.
Yeah. Sure. So there's a lot of bullets flying around.
Right.
That's one thing, like movies never really, when they go to a general who's behind the line, right? If like the general gets hit and that's part of the story, that's the only time you hear a bullet. But in reality, there's probably all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You're not that far away. So those overshots, they got to land somewhere. They got to come down. And if they're not hitting the guys on the line that you're aiming for, they're going to keep going until they go in the dirt or they hit somebody else.
Right.
And so you better believe that you're hearing all these. That's the thing. Like, the generals are always behind the lines. So what?
They're above them.
they're behind the lines and they're on horses. Yeah.
Now Reynolds is probably too close, for him to be the overall commander on the field at the time. I mean, he's a little bit too close to the thick of the fighting. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think that it was a sharpshooter, or any even intentional shot.
He should have taken that job Lincoln offered him.
Yeah.
To command the army.
I know. Would have been a whole different story too. But
that's another story.
That is another story. So, okay. So now we can continue on now. So they withdraw.
Yes.
Back across Willoughby Run.
That's right.
Back up to Hers Ridge.
Correct.
Right.
Do you say Hers Ridge or Her Ridge?
Well, I say hers.
You say hers.
Although it is her.
It is Her Ridge.
It's spelled Her Ridge.
Right. It's not Hers Ridge. Yeah. But it sounds better to say hers.
Yeah, because it's possessive.
Yeah.
It's like a possessive.
Yeah.
HERR apostrophe.
Like we do Culp's Hill. You don't put the apostrophe in. That takes too much time.
It does.
So it's just Culp's Hill. It's like the hill's more than one.
I only put it in if the autocorrect on my phone catches it.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because who's got the time to go and put the apostrophe in? Like, please. So they go over there. They're on Her Ridge. And what are they doing now at this point? Now, this is the lull. We call this the lull, right?
Yeah, they're reorganizing, right?
They're reorganizing.
They're down behind the ridge. They're sorting things out.
Now, do you think they've taken heavy casualties by this point?
Yes, I
heavy
do.
enough.
Yeah,
heavy enough, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, you lost your commander for what?
Oh, well, that's a big one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they got to reorganize, and Fry now has to kind of get his bearings as the brigade commander.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which means his replacement in his regiment, what did you say, 13th?
13th Alabama.
So now he has to get his bearings, and all below him who've gone up. Yeah. So they've got that to do, but also the armies are gathering at this point, right? Like more troops are coming in. You mentioned before when I stopped this for some other tangent that more Confederate troops are coming into the area.
They hear the noise.
Talk about right.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Go ahead.
But I was going to say the amazing thing to me is that despite the fact that they were in such a bad situation, they didn't lose a flag.
Not yet.
They got all the flags out.
Yep.
Not yet, but they got all the flags out.
Right.
That to me shows some degree of cohesion.
Right.
I mean, these are veteran troops, so they don't run easily.
Right.
And when you run with your flag.
Yeah.
You don't leave them behind.
Right.
So I would say that.
Might leave your commander behind, but not the flag.
Who needs the commander?
Don't need that guy.
It takes so long to make those flags, Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's not only veteran troops, but it's undefeated veteran troops.
That's right.
There you go.
So this isn't some, group of guys who've been sitting in a fort for the whole war. Like these guys have been in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. You talk about battles. They were part of the units that stormed the Union line at Gaines Mill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Hood always gets the credit, but they were right there.
Right.
Right with them.
And you mentioned earlier before the show, they were with Hill's division at Antietam.
That's correct.
Yes.
And so they were part of the guys that saved the day.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And made that, tremendous march from Harper's Ferry all the way to Antietam Creek to, save the day at the 11th hour.
Although Stonewall Jackson wasn't admitted, they saved his bacon at Cedar Mountain.
Cedar Mountain,
as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So they've done. Oh, and then also at Chancellorsville, they're the ones that
take Hazel Grove.
Hazel Grove.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, they're the ones that unite Lee's army. So without them taking Hazel's Grove from one Daniel Sickles, then Lee's army doesn't come back together.
But is this a surprise that guys from the land of Davy Crockett are good fighters?
It shouldn't be.
No, not at all.
Be.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, they still have a certain frontier attitude.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's in their blood.
Even today, they're the volunteers.
We're still the volunteers.
Yeah. Volunteers.
That's right. That's right.
They don't know what they're volunteering for, but they're volunteers.
Sometimes we're voluntold.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
All right. So continue the story. Go ahead.
Yes.
Wherever you want to go.
So obviously more Confederates are coming on the field, not just obviously from the west of Gettysburg, but also they're coming in from the north, and more and more Confederate pressures coming on the Union lines there. So they are being reorganized, as you alluded to earlier. They're having to find out who's in charge, who's commanding these new companies, regiments, and of course they have a new brigade commander. So after they've been reinforced and they've got more men that are coming online, that Union line begins to give way as that increased pressure comes from Oak Ridge, and they begin to recross Willoughby's Run, and they attack McPherson's Ridge again at that point, and the Union line begins to give way.
They were pushed into the seminary.
Yeah.
And some actually went down towards town trying to catch a lot of Union prisoners.
So they're part of even though we think of the troops that would come up later as part of that fight, they're still part of it. They're coming in behind them. Is that how it's going?
Yeah, Archer was used, I think, by Harry.
Heath?
Harry.
Debbie?
Because Lee, it was one of the few generals Lee mentioned by his first name.
Harry.
Wonder why that was.
Well, he doesn't know if it's Heath or Heth either.
Oh, okay.
And he doesn't want to mispronounce a fellow Virginian's name. That's my theory. I'm sticking to it.
It could be.
I don't know if it'll stand up in court. But that's it.
Sounds legitimate.
Yeah. And so as they're moving forward, I mean, he reorganized the division, and he put Pettigrew and Brockenbrough in the front line.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Davis and Archer were in the second line. Archer was flank security.
Yep.
He's going to get a little tangled up with Brieford's cavalry.
Yep.
Oh, that's
out there
right.
on the Fairfield Road.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's not really in the assault per se.
But he's still active.
He's still active.
He's not. His day isn't done.
Up, right.
Yeah.
Now they've sustained substantial casualties, and I'm sort of jumping to the end of the story here. But whenever Lee rides through what is Hill's Corps, whenever they're the prelude to Pickett's charge, he's like, man, a lot of these men need to be in the rear.
Right.
I mean, they've experienced significant casualties, probably worse than what Lee realized whenever he orders what becomes known as Pickett's charge. So they've been significantly bloodied. They've lost a lot of leadership and also just raw numbers. They've had a serious casualty experience. Do you have any estimate, Charlie, how many men they lost on July 1, or do we have any idea of that?
No, they don't. They didn't break it down as far as I know, but they will take over 57% losses in the battle.
Yeah,
almost 60%.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, a lot of that's Pickett's charge, but I'd say they probably took 25
easy
percent losses on the first day.
Yeah, definitely.
And it wasn't a long fight for them. It was maybe half an hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it probably longer than the fight.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is often the case.
And it's only 50 minutes in Pickett's charge.
Yeah.
Right. So these guys fought an hour and a half.
Right.
And took 60% losses.
Right.
And you don't get that kind of stuff if you're hiding. Or if you're shy.
Right.
You got to get out there.
You're in the arena for sure.
You're in the arena, man. You got to go get them.
Yeah. Yeah, and then 2 days later, you're doing it again, and it's like even worse. It's like across this open field. All right, so well, go ahead, continue the story then.
Yeah. So obviously, the Union line breaks, and that's when you have now who breaks first. That's the old story, right? Is it the 9th Corps, or is it the 11th Corps, or the 1st Corps? Yeah. And whatever, it doesn't really matter. At any rate, there's the stampede through town, and they begin to form on Cemetery Ridge, on the other side of town through there. Archer's Brigade, they come in as basically as reserve at this point because they've been so utilized, and more Confederate troops have come up that don't have those casualties there in the front lines. They're following behind those troops. They come to the Lutheran seminary and they, pursue the troops through town. They stop as darkness gathers, and they begin to reorganize, and Lee places them on Seminary Ridge with the rest of the division. And they basically remain there. They're not engaged on July 2nd to any great degree. They
get the day off.
Yeah, that's right.
They earned it.
That's exactly right.
Sure.
Yeah,
they definitely earned it.
Yeah, they lick their wounds, kind of reorganize, refit. Get
they're
some,
in the golf
get some
course.
Supplies. Yeah, exactly right.
That's where they are.
That's
where they are.
Yeah, they try to get in 18 holes. On the
they only have 9.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but here's my take on it. Okay, once the afternoon fight begins, okay, I believe that the 1st Corps was driven off McPherson's Ridge before the 11th Corps broke.
Okay.
And they're pushed back to the seminary. The reason I believe this is because when they often talk about seeing the 11th Corps breaking, you can't see the 11th Corps from McPherson's Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But you can from the seminary.
Right.
And then, of course, Juba Early arrives late, makes all the difference.
Right.
Comes in behind the 11th Corps line, and what are they going to do?
Right.
It's almost like Archer's Brigade. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Let's get out of here and live to fight another day.
And I think the 11th always kind of gets a bad rap. I think for a lot of different reasons. It kind of reminds me of a story. My little brother, we were in Sunday school, and this little girl said, Teacher Colton's got his eyes open during the prayer. And my brother says, well, you would know I had my eyes open unless you had your eyes open too, right? So it's kind of, so I think it's kind of like that, to your point with the first, it's like, oh, I saw the 11th Corps break. Well, you wouldn't have seen them break if you hadn't already broken because you were already at this
you're running,
far back.
You're facing backwards.
We saw you break because we were behind you're running away, you know? So.
Good stuff.
That's funny. That's funny.
But they all ran together with them.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they get the day off on the second, bloodiest single day of the battle.
Yep.
Second day.
Right.
So maybe that's why Lee thought they were ready to go in again, because they were rested. But then, like you said, when he sees how few troops there are, oh my God, you know, what's Anderson doing? I want to be with Billy Mahone.
Right.
Little Billy and I. Yeah, he has one casualty.
Yeah.
You know?
Is that right?
Yeah.
He has one
casualty.
They just never come off the line.
They never come off the line. It's too dark for him on the second day.
Wow.
You know? So that's Little Billy.
Lucky.
Yeah. And,
Like they got to say they were at Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Never did anything.
They can put it on their flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. True enough. So I think that's why Lee said, okay, these guys fought the first day. They had the second day off. They should be rested, reorganized, ready to go. And that's a problem with staff work.
Yep.
They don't have a staff. Confederates don't have a real good staff.
They don't. Well, and we forgot to mention this, but also, you know, Heath gets wounded on July 1. So he gets a pretty serious head wound. So
he does.
So you've lost your division commander, you've lost your brigade commander, you know, you've lost multiple company and, you know, regimental officers at this point. So they're trying to put everything together. So, you know, at this point, you know, they've been reorganized and, you know, they've been put together, and we've got Pettigrew in charge of the division commander at this point. And I've got a new, brigade commander took over for Pettigrew at that.
Yeah, who was that? Was that Marshall or Lowrance?
That was Marshall.
Yeah.
And then Mayo is going to take over for Brockenbrough.
Mayo.
Right.
Well, he commanded part of Brockenbrough's brigade. Yeah. Lowrance, I think, took over for Lane. I'm not sure. I have to look.
Yeah. Mike, do you remember?
Not off the top of my head, no.
No.
Well, what good is the top of your head then?
Oh, at least it has hair.
Oh,
Ooh.
so true.
Yeah, so you got a lot of brigade commanders who were regimental commanders when the battle started. Okay, and you got division commanders who were brigade commanders when the battle started. You know, you got Pettigrew, you got Trimble, a legend in his own mind. Okay.
Although he has very nice things to say about the troops he commanded.
Yeah, he does. He does. Another Marylander.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
And West Pointer graduated a year before Lee from West Point, and he didn't have a division. So Lee gives him what's a demi brigade, two regiments of Pender. Pender's down.
Yeah. Pender's killed
on the second day.
Second day.
Yeah. So by the time you get to the third day, it's a different army.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Matt, Lowrance is going to take Scales' brigade.
Nothing.
The other ones Charlie was right about.
Just stood there.
Oh,
What, Mikey? I'm sorry.
I was saying Lowrance.
Trimble was yelling.
Lowrance takes over for Scales.
Scales. Okay.
He's wounded on the first day. His men were assaulting the seminary line.
Yeah.
And Lee sees this, and what they do? They break through.
So, okay, we always hear about how Lee is going into this battle with 2 new corps commanders, new division commanders, all untested in that position.
Correct.
And here, the first endeavor they're embarking upon is an invasion of the North, and then this big battle occurs and everything like that. But then that's where that whole new to command argument typically stops, right? But here you're making a good point, is by the third day, Heath's division, Pender's division, a lot of them, if not all of them, are under the command of someone who wasn't their commander when the battle started.
100%.
Yeah.
And so now you've got, and not to mention the walking wounded and everything. And so you've got this, like, it sounds like they're just a mess, you know, and nothing against them. I mean, this is the way the situation was, and they're trying to put it all together. And it's not that, you know, I wonder sometimes how much of that whole, you know, well, he's new to command thing is a civilian interpretation of things. And I wonder if a military person would
Armchair quarterbacking.
You think that's it?
Well, look at it. What day does the South do the best?
the first.
And there's the two guys that are new.
Right.
Okay. So, So your argument doesn't hold water.
Right. Yeah.
No, so that's a good point. Well, right, because usually I've heard that excuse being made when it's coming to them bringing on a general engagement against Lee's orders.
Yes.
And okay, but my thing is like, you go from division command to corps command.
Correct.
How big of a difference is that? I mean, a division is pretty big.
Yes.
A corps is obviously a little bigger, but it's still a huge undertaking to move and manage a division. A corps is now, it's like, okay, I did one division before, but now I have 3 divisions that I have to manage. But they're also being managed by their division commanders.
Right.
I don't know. I've never been a corps commander, but I know that as you go up, things tend to get easier because you have a staff, you have subordinates who do their jobs, and your job becomes more administrative the higher up you go.
That's correct.
Than it is, hands-on.
But I think a big problem, and I'd love to hear what Charlie thinks about this, is I don't think Lee has the communication with his officers that Meade has with his officers. I think there's a huge information deficit between the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac, and I think there's a huge communication deficit. Meade has that Council of War. I think that's to his credit. I think that's important to bring people together and talk about it. So everybody knows what's going on. I think within those corps there's better communication between corps commander and division and brigades and what's going on in Lee's army. Nobody really 160 years later, nobody really knows where's AP Hill during the 3 days of the battle. We've got some general ideas.
It just sort of disappears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't know that Lee ever has a council of war as such.
He never got all of them together.
All three together at the same place at the same time.
The closest he came was planning Pickett's charge.
Right.
On the morning of the 3rd.
Right.
After things had already gone wrong.
Who did he have with him?
Hill and Longstreet. Okay, Ewell was involved in the fighting on Culp's Hill.
Right. And I think that, and I think that's what really hurts the Army of Northern Virginia. I mean, because maybe not so much newness of command, but I'm new to command and I'm not getting in any direction, and I don't know. I don't think Lee knows the status of his army on July 3rd. Really, I don't think he knows how many effectives he really has.
Right.
And I think a lot of these brigade commanders don't know what's going on with some of their regiments, and you can just kind of go up the food chain from Lee.
There's a different style of command.
Sure.
I mean, both Hill and Ewell served under Jackson, who tells you what to do, when to do it. Yeah. And if you don't, you court-martial.
Right.
It's fairly easy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's more of a hands-on. He's less flexible.
Right.
If you will. Okay. Lee is trying to build leadership. So this is what we need to do. You figure out how to do it. And if you've been under Jackson, what do you mean me figure out? Aren't you in charge?
Yeah.
And so this causes some hesitation.
Right. And if you're Lee, to Lee's defense, I mean, I've got a 68,000 man army that I've got to try to manage and logistics and feed these guys and I can't be dealing with the minutia of every little decision. So I've got to delegate it to these guys. Otherwise,
that's why they have the more minute ranks, because they deal with minutia.
Well, just like when they say, well, Lee had cavalry.
Yeah.
But that's not his job.
Right.
That's Stuart's job, and he should have ordered them up when they left Virginia. And they don't need them down there watching gaps in Virginia. They need them up here.
Right.
Yeah.
And when Lee figured out they weren't up here, he ordered them up.
Right.
Jenkins and Robertson's brigades in particular. Okay, that's what I tell you. I mean, Lee's got all these other problems. He can't make sure the men's room's clean. He can't do it. That's somebody else's job, right?
That's exactly right. That's what Matt tells Mike all the time. I was in here earlier. He's like, I can't.
That's literally that was the conversation we had before. Mike's like, oh look, there's a speck of dust on the desk, and I'm like, Mike.
Speck of dust, Matt. There's like old pizza.
There's no pizza.
Half a rotten cheesesteak under here.
Oh my god!
I don't even know what that is.
Two things I don't eat anymore.
Oh yeah, I heard.
That's something.
That's your lunch, Mike. Why don't you take it and be grateful?
I brought that for you, and you let it sit there for 2 weeks.
Well, I'm on a diet,
and now it's got hair. It's got more hair in it than my head. Oh, now he's on a diet.
Yeah.
Oh, God. All right. Where were we?
July 3rd.
Yes. Big day. Mm-hmm. So, okay. One more point, though, about the command changing on many levels within those divisions there. So people like to use that as an excuse. But correct me if I'm wrong. wouldn't it typically be that if I'm the colonel of a regiment and I move up to brigade command, I'm just moving up to brigade command and the staff stays as it was. I'm not taking my staff.
Which is what Doug Dowd's talked about.
Yeah,
that's
earlier.
Right.
You know,
so you have that, as they call it, what do they call it? Institutional memory
institutional memory, and you know, people know where the bodies are buried.
So all I have to do is just kind of weigh the evidence and say, okay, we're doing this. Right. It's not like I have to learn, and my staff that I brought with me has to learn.
Right.
The staff stays where it is.
Right.
And the commander just moves because it's a temporary move.
And you use the other guy's staff.
And I use the other guy's staff because
which he handpicked.
But they know what the situation is.
Sure.
Because they've been through it up until this point. And so they can just update me and I can be like, all right, here's what we're going to do from now on.
That's why Meade keeps Butterfield.
Yeah, 100%.
He knows where everybody is, where they're going.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Why would you not?
I know.
Yeah.
That would have been a disaster if he tried to put somebody else.
Well, I think that shows good leadership by Meade. Because,
I do too.
If you were a petty leader, or if you were someone who's like, oh, I want my people, I want my loyalists in here, then you would fire everybody and then install.
And you wouldn't win the battle.
100%.
Yeah.
And one of the things that kept that army, the Potomac, close to being successful was the staff.
Yeah.
You changed generals, but a lot of the staff guys at the top staff positions, like Warren, for example, Patrick Messina, they stayed on the Army staff.
Right.
These are professional West Pointers. So a new guy comes in, he can say, well, what do I need to do here? What are you doing? And he said, well, this is what I've been doing for the last year. Type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So
you mean Marcena Patrick?
Marcena Patrick.
Yeah.
What did I say? Marcena.
Patrick Marcena. And I was like,
well, that's how
you mean Kathy Mattea?
No, that's how he signs his name. They have to sign.
Oh, yeah.
You sign your name first, last name first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got it.
Don't question the great Charlie.
Okay, I'm sorry, Charlie.
Yeah, at least I saw it that signed that way one time. But that's a guy. What's his name?
Marcena Patrick.
Oh, Patrick. Does he know that?
I don't know. It was Kenny Loggins' partner,
but he was
Patrick Messina.
Yeah. But he was very good at his job, And then you got Warren and Hunt.
Yeah,
these guys, these guys served under several different popes. Pope comes and goes, but the Cardinals are still there.
Yeah, that's right.
And the church goes on.
Right,
and that's the Army of the Potomac. Yeah.
So July 3rd.
Okay,
let's get to July 3rd. All right,
So at this point, obviously, Lee's tried the extreme Union left. He's tried the extreme Union right. Not had any success at that point. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, Gaines Mill.
Gaines Mill.
So we think about what worked there. There was this large assault. It was actually a larger assault than what we see at Pickett's Charge against the Union Center. John Bell Hood, he kind of gets the credit for it. He's in the Mort Kunstler, right?
Coming over the wall.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And Lee thinks maybe the Union Center's vulnerable at this point, but he's going to need enough men to amass against that. We all know that Pickett's division has not been engaged in the first 2 days of the battle. He understands they're going to be the tip of the spear, but he gathers units that he thinks are going to be available. And he looks to, at this point, Pettigrew's division, obviously formerly Heath's division, and
Harry.
That's right.
Sorry.
Harry. No, you're good. Let's surprise Harry Heath. That's right. So gather those brigades together, and he's going to have this larger orchestrated assault that's going to be under Longstreet's overall command, and they're going to push forward, and they're going to break the Union Center. Now, I think Lee's intention, obviously, we've got the cannonade. He's assembled all those cannons along Seminary Ridge,
right,
and to have that. But I think he also eventually wants to move once the men move off the line. I think the intention is we're going to move these cannons up. Probably
that was it.
That was the intention. That doesn't happen that way, but we're going to move them maybe into the Peach Orchard area and and provide some supporting fire,
or even beyond that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what Napoleon would have probably instructed Lee at this. If he was at the Battle of Gettysburg.
That's what those short barrel mountain howitzers.
Exactly right. Yeah, howitzer is going to be they're going to support
close support
against personnel from that point.
Right.
And he looks down the lines. He's going to utilize of course James J. Archer's formerly Archer's Brigade. Now he's going to be under Fry. Now I've always. And I think sometimes it gets romanticized. Obviously, you get a little, lost cause with Pickett's Charge and everything. But I will say, I think that the movie Gettysburg, which we talked about this earlier. I'll pause and make this correction. The guy fighting for my rats, he probably sounds a whole lot like me on this podcast right now. But
you're more articulate than that.
A correction with that, of course, the actor that you interviewed did a phenomenal job from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
He says, I'm from Tennessee, got captured at the railroad cut. Well, he must have been a deserter or lost or something. Because where was he over there, right?
He says he's from Archer's Brigade.
He tries to hide.
Jeff, he's not over there. What is he talking about?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
But I think Gettysburg, in the prelude to Pickett's Charge, I think they do a good job of, these are all veteran soldiers.
Right.
They've made the charge at Gaines Mill. They've made serious assaults before. They know what's in front of them, and these men choose to make that assault across that open field that becomes Pickett's Charge. And I think it says a lot about their personal bravery. It says a lot about, them as soldiers. Yeah. And their belief in Lee. 100%.
There was a story, one of the reunions, I think it was the 38 reunion. There was a guy there and they reenacted Pickett's Charge. I don't know how many guys they still had alive could walk. But they went up and this guy looked at these Confederates. He said, "You mean you came across that open field?" And the guy said, "We sure did." He said, "I never do that." And the guy looked at him with a smile on his face. He says, "Evidently, you never served under Robert E. Lee."
Right, yeah.
You served under him. He asked you to do it. You're going to do it.
Yeah,
you do it.
For sure.
And that's Lee's army.
Right.
Yeah. Has complete faith in Lee.
They have total faith in Lee.
And Lee has faith in them.
100%.
It's a faith circle.
It is. And it's earned.
Yeah.
A whole year.
Right. Well, I mean, that is the thing. So we did a show that came out this week about Lee's plan on July 3rd with Lewis Trott. And somebody had commented, there's a few comments that basically are like, well, I can't imagine why Lee would do that for Pickett's Charge.
Sure.
That's such a stupid move, a foolish move, a waste of life. And I agree with all that. But as I pointed out to them, I said, but we have hindsight on our side.
That's true.
And also like Lee hasn't lost a battle.
And the Yankees always run.
At worst, it's a draw.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. At worst.
Right. And he has done things against all odds before.
Yes.
And won.
Exactly.
So, this idea of this one fresh division with a bunch of battered ones going across this open field under artillery fire and everything. Yeah, it sounds insane. And they had to know that would have happened back then, right? You knew, but you get over there as quickly as you can to get away from the artillery fire. And then, you slug it out with the infantry. But there were also plenty of people who were like, this is nuts, but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes you make the best decision from a series of bad options.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Sure.
and Doug Dowds gave a really good talk about this one time that I was honored to be at. And he was talking about Lee's strategy, sort of thinking through this. And I think we forget about logistics a lot of times.
Absolutely.
In the American Civil War. So Lee's on foreign ground. He knows that he can only feed his army for 3 days. I've parked this army here at Gettysburg. And in the back of his mind, there's a shot clock going out. He's like, I've only got so much supplies for so long before we're going to have to move or do something different.
And Meade knows that too.
Meade knows that as well. And he knows that eventually the North is going to marshal more resources and more men. He knows that time's not necessarily on his side either.
Yeah.
He's in Pennsylvania. He's never been this far before.
And he's not coming back.
You're right. I mean, so what are you going to do? He says, I've got enough men. I've got enough food. I've got enough ammunition for one more good fight.
Yeah.
I'm here. I know that they've reinforced on the flanks. I've pierced the center of a Union army before.
And they did it to a degree on the second.
And they did, yeah.
Wright supposedly got up over the stone wall.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It was, even though it was very bloody and they got, beaten up pretty bad, like they gained some ground.
Yeah.
There's
two things that people don't consider. They don't consider it. One is the smoke.
Right.
Can't see a thing.
Right.
Once the Confederates start their attack, they get close to a third of the way across the field before the Yankees even know they're coming.
Yeah.
And then they disappear. Where'd they go?
Into
the ground undulates.
Yeah.
It undulates.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I know it goes up and down, up and down. And when you're down, You can't be seen, right? You can't be seen. It's hard to shoot you. And that's what Lee's looking at that.
Right.
It's like Vauban. Vauban, the first military scientist in history. He served under Louis the XIV.
Okay.
and Vauban, and this just hit my head because we watched Last of the Mohicans.
Oh yeah, great movie.
Okay.
It is a very good movie.
And they're making parallels. They're digging trenches so they can get close to Fort George.
Right.
And then they're going to blow a hole in it. Lee sees that. I mean, he's a West Pointer.
Right.
He's a topographic engineer, second in his
100%,
class.
100%.
He's not an idiot.
Right.
Okay, and he sees, men can get there, and then they get here. I see the parallel trenches. Okay? And I believe that's going through his mind. And and I don't buy all this stuff where only like 6 Confederates got over the road. I think there were 7. But anyway, the point to be made is I think a lot of those guys got over the road. I don't know how many.
Right.
I don't think they do. Okay.
Right.
But it's from the road to the wall is where you're taking the casualty.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Because you're coming under small arms fire.
Small arms fire, canister.
Yeah.
That's where you're getting the casualties. Look how close. Look how far they came to get to that. Get that far.
Sure.
And so Lee believes the Union Army will crack. They always do. Okay, but why didn't they? Well, look at the guys holding the angle. They're Pennsylvanians.
Right. Yeah.
And I think Bob didn't understand that Northerners will fight as hard in the North as Southerners fight in the South.
Right.
He has developed, and I hate to use this word in Robert E. Lee's presence, contempt for his enemy.
I agree.
There's a certain contempt for him.
He definitely underestimates the Union Army. I think he does. I think he does not view them as equals to his men.
And he thought that this was a good idea. And it was up until 4 o'clock.
Up until it wasn't.
Well, and Meade's got the benefit of interior lines.
He does.
I mean, he's got a much easier way to draw on reinforcements and get ammunition and everything else. I mean, whereas Lee's going to have to go, a mile away to.
Well, he's got to send Anderson across, and by the time he gets there, all these other Union troops have showed up.
Exactly. And to circle back to something Matt said earlier, is Reynolds actually going to be that close to his front line if it's not in his home state, if it's not 30 miles away? He's feeling the moment.
Sure.
Yes.
And it's that adrenaline.
He's 50 miles from home.
Yeah.
50 miles from home. Now, getting back to Archer's Brigade.
Okay.
Archer's Brigade is the brigade of direction. How do you get all those people to strike where you want them?
You mean he's the guide brigade?
He's the guide brigade.
Talk about that.
Yeah. And so there's fences. Now, a lot of these fences don't have rails in them because they like their food hot. Mm-hmm. But the posts are still standing.
Right.
And there's a fence that goes across the field. It has the rails in now.
Yeah.
He lines up on that fence, and they follow the posts. And the rest of the 3rd Corps guys line up on Archer.
Right.
Which is now Burkett Fry.
So what you're talking about is for people who are trying to picture what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You go to the Virginia Memorial
and you see a fence.
You look straight out and you're going to see a fence line that goes straight across on your left.
That's correct.
Yes. That's the one. They're to the left of that
Pickett's
fence.
all the way over here to the right.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's supposed to close in on Fry, probably close to the Emmitsburg Road, and then they rush the angle.
Yep.
Right? The clumps of trees comes in later. Lee wants them to hit that angle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, because angles are weak spots, as we know, because you can be shot at from 2 different directions.
Right.
It doubles your chances of being one of the honored dead. Mm-hmm. And if I get enough people over there, you get shot. Okay, and where's the 71st Pennsylvania? Well, it's not in the angle. It pulled out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there, Lee thought, hey, this is working. He just didn't see how few men there were at that point. So, the concept is, I guess, acceptable. I accept Lee's concept.
Yeah.
Okay. But like I say, he didn't factor in that most of that army across the way is from Pennsylvania. He didn't factor that in.
Right.
Okay.
Which has worked in his army's favor the whole war so far.
Ironic, right?
Yeah.
It is ironic. Yeah. It really is. What made him successful brings them down to Gettysburg. Yeah.
But, right. It's not that it was ever easy for them.
Right. It wouldn't be.
No. But that home court advantage does take away one discomfort that the opponent has.
Right.
Right. And so after a while, if you keep winning in the home court and then you go to the other guy's court, you forget one of the big, most important factors that you have, which is the home court advantage. And you forget that that's one of the reasons why you've been winning a lot. Yeah. And now you don't have that.
You don't have it.
And also you don't have a lot of things. You don't have, you don't have your supply at your back, very close by your
especially
home base.
Ammunition.
Yeah, that's
ammunition.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so you're in this exterior line. It's just too much. And there's a lot of ground to cover. There's more ground to cover.
Right.
So it's okay.
I'm going to tell you why the South lost.
Go ahead. The world has been
Matt
wondering.
Wants to know.
I want to know.
And I'll tell you, it's because Lee failed to win on the road when it mattered. That's why they lost. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right. But if they had won, and of course I hate these what ifs, but if they won at Gettysburg, do you think that would have made that much of a difference?
There'd be more than one country between Canada and Mexico.
Do you really think so?
I do.
You really think so, Charlie?
Yeah, I do. Lincoln's out.
Okay.
What people fail to realize is that Lincoln is the first American president to have to force Americans to serve their country.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The federal draft, as we know and love it today, goes into effect on the 4th of July, 1863. The armies are still here shooting at one another.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they got to go to New York to put down the draft rights.
Right.
The 60s. I remember some of the 60s. How about you? Okay. So this is it. This is what people see. Victory equals means times will.
Okay.
It did when Cain slew Abel. It will when the Martians invade in 2513. We know they're coming. We got email. Okay. And Lee is smart enough to realize I can't undermine the means of the North to fight a war. I got too much stuff. But I can undermine their will to use it. And that's what he's doing with every victory he wins. He's cutting support from underneath the war effort. Okay. So that's why I believe he wins this battle. I vote the war. Nixon peace with honor. Oh, that's another war. I'm sorry. I was dropped as a baby. But I believe that.
So, in other words, if it's a loss up here, no matter what happens before the election, people aren't going to forget this.
No,
Lincoln's toast.
That's right.
Which means then McClellan is in.
Perhaps, yeah. Well,
I mean,
the Democrats are in.
If all things stay the same.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have a negotiated peace. Maybe you keep the country together if you grant Southerners what they want.
Right.
And basically what they want is to be able to expand slavery.
So you have either a much different country.
Right. Or none.
Or no. Yeah, you two.
None.
You have two countries.
Well, you might have more.
Well, you might have more because everybody's
going to leave New York.
Yeah.
I know that for sure.
Well, and I think that's, we talk a lot about, the different causes of the war. And I think that's one, and Gary Gallagher did a good job with this in his book about the Union cause. Because I think that's something that we in the 21st century, we don't really understand that idea of, well, why would you fight to preserve the Union? Like it's sort of an amorphous topic, but I think what people in the 19th century understood was if you allow these 11 states to leave, what's going to happen when New York gets mad at the rest of the country?
And then California.
I mean, good riddance to them. Maybe we should. I'm just kidding. But
we have a lot of California listeners, sir.
I know.
Yeah, we have a lot in town, so you be careful.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. But that was a concern for the Union fighting man in 1861. Was like, hey, we're going to. Either this country is something different, or we're going to become like Europe, where you have all these
petty states.
Yeah, just all these small little countries and everything. And it's just going to be broken apart. Either the Union is indissoluble or it's not.
Yeah.
Either we are a country together, and it doesn't matter who wins or loses an election. We're all going to be together, or we're not. And I think that's something. I don't know. It's hard to make a glory type movie about that idea and about that concept. But I think it was a huge motivating factor.
Well, Lincoln comes here and speaks. I missed it. He spoke for 2 minutes. I was getting funnel cake.
I thought he went to the Lincoln Diner.
It was packed.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, he speaks for 2 minutes and gives perhaps the greatest speech ever.
Right.
I agree.
Slavery isn't in that speech once. It's all about government of the people, by the people, for the people. This is the concept. This is what they're fighting for.
Right.
Okay, that's why they can't let the South leave.
Well, there is a part about a new birth of freedom. What's he talking about?
There's a new birth of freedom for the country.
Oh.
Okay, that's what he says.
Okay.
All right. In other words, we get to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. get to put the pieces together. It took all of Lincoln's horses and all Lincoln's men to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Okay.
Okay.
And that's so that this democracy will persevere.
Okay.
You know what they're calling our democracy in Europe? The Great Folly. A country this big and diverse will never be able to rule democratically. And they were almost right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So I think that's what's going on. And, you know, you read some of their diaries and such. I mean, one of the ones they used in the Civil War thing with Ken Burns.
Mm-hmm.
What was his name? Elijah Hunt Rhodes.
Yes, yes.
What's the name of his book?
All for the Union.
There you go.
Yeah.
All for the Union. That's what it's about.
Okay.
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 I'm done pontificating.
No, that was interesting because I would you argue then that the people that use a new birth of freedom to refer to what would be former slaves is a misinterpretation of it or a bastardization of it, or
I think it's a misinterpretation because Lincoln, he wasn't an abolitionist.
Right.
He's not an abolitionist.
But he did issue the Emancipation Proclamation.
Why?
What?
Why?
To beat the Confederates.
There you go.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
It's a military measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've always thought it's interesting. I mean, it was a brilliant political maneuver.
It was, sure.
But who do you free with the Emancipation Proclamation?
That's right. He freed the slaves where he couldn't. Kept them slaves where he could.
Yeah.
I love this country.
Yeah.
There are two people that do, Bill Clinton and I. We love America.
We love it. I love
You
LA.
didn't know what you're getting in for, did you?
I like it, man. I'm along for the ride. I'll be your Huckleberry anytime.
By the way,
thank you.
For the sake of the people without a sense of humor, that was called sarcasm when you said I love this country after saying that you free the slaves where you can and keep them where you can.
Yeah.
You were being sarcastic.
Is that what I was doing?
Yes, you were. You were. I don't want to get you in trouble, Charles.
I know. They'll come and shoot me in the evening.
Don't even joke because they will now.
Well, and that's,
that's true.
What's going on right now?
And I think there's no question.
Mike said that. I didn't say it.
Come on, Charlie, throw me under the bus. I've been so nice to you today.
Mikey
I know you
B.
have. I apologize.
I mean, and I think that's the
Grumpy
sad
old
thing
man.
is that we can't.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, and I think that's and of course you have an education background, and I think that's one of the sad things about the current state of affairs is
That he has an education
yes,
background.
obviously that, right?
A lot of people say that.
But you can't. I mean, obviously, slavery, great moral evil.
Yeah.
Yes, it
no
is.
question, terrible,
No doubt about
terrible
it.
circumstance, and obviously we're glad for the outcome of the conflict. No question about that. But I mean, to talk about different causes of the war and what that meant and kind of what the practicality of it. I mean, you can have those discussions as reasonable, educated people, and not obviously mean that you're saying, which is what you were saying there, Charlie. So
See,
I'm giving you some.
See, Lincoln's a gradual abolitionist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He believed, and I think he's right, if slavery doesn't expand, it'll die a natural death.
Mm-hmm.
You know how plants are. They get real big, you got to repot them
Right.
or they die.
Right.
So you contain it where it is, and it'll pass away. It'll be gone without anybody getting shot.
Uh-huh.
And that's what he believed. It's not slavery where it is that's the real problem.
It's expanding it.
It's slavery where it isn't.
Yeah.
That's what brings it into the political arena. Every time we add territory, we got to revisit that problem.
Yeah.
Can slavery go there or not?
Right.
Okay, and since Matt jumped on the Californians, I will too.
Okay.
It's their fault.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the whole war.
The whole war is
There you go.
California's fault.
Because we did Noah's Ark principle, one slave, one free, from the Missouri Compromise to 1850.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When California comes in, it comes in on its own. No other state can come and balance it. The South felt comfortable in the Union, knowing that in the Senate, they can block unfriendly legislation
Right.
because they had an equality of senators. All the other branches of the government are gone, but they have the Senate. Now they don't. John C. Calhoun said, if you let California come in unescorted, you will have bloody civil war in 10 years. He missed it by 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
By 9 months.
Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to say we've gone a little bit afield of Archer's Brigade, but
this is how it works when your host has ADD.
Well, that's okay. But hey, Tennessee divided state, right? Divided loyalties. So we're talking about the causes, and I think one thing that we sometimes forget, and one thing that I worry about as a current political observer, is the country really split before 1861. So you see these divisions. There's a Northern Democratic Party and a Southern Democratic Party.
Right.
There's Northern Baptists and there's Southern Baptists.
So Northern Methodist, Southern Methodist.
Exactly. So there's all these ruptures that have occurred.
The Whig Party disappears.
Conflict. Yeah, Whig Party goes away, and which Robert Hatton was a member of.
So was Lincoln,
and Lincoln was as well.
Yeah, Lincoln was.
And now you've basically got two factions of a country, and they don't really have any commonality between them. And I worry about that. And I'm not saying we're getting ready to go into a civil war by no means, but I do worry as you look the way social media has kind of divided the country and the way people are sort of moving and gravitating to places where they feel
they're literally moving.
They're voting with their feet.
We're more contentious.
Yeah, and you're beginning to see churches divide again. You're beginning to see parties.
It is. You're right.
Well,
it's a little.
What worries me, all those are worrisome, but to me, what worries me the most is that families that won't break bread together anymore.
Yeah, 100%.
When that happens,
that's bad.
That's bad.
I can't tell you how many people I know personally who parents won't talk to the kids over politics.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't care.
Or the kids won't talk to the parents.
Yeah, vice versa. Yeah.
Either way.
A lot of times it's the younger generation ostracizing the older, sadly. But it's just crazy. And I don't know that history repeats itself, but sometimes it rhymes.
It rhymes, yeah.
And that gives me some concern.
Yeah. Well, back to Archer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, comes
July
with
3rd.
1,198 men. There's 69 killed. 219 wounded, 396 captured.
Jeez.
For 684 out of 1198, 57.1% casualties.
You know what's amazing about those numbers? And when you get into all these battles, this is often the way it is, where you have fewer killed. It surprises me, especially in those days. Because you've got those soft lead bullets. Yeah. We're not very good with. I guess that would be killed outright, right? We're not talking about mortally wounded or people who die later of their wounds.
Yeah. Or you just don't know what happened to him.
Yeah,
he's missing.
Right. Yeah,
so
missing.
He's probably dead.
We got too close to the cannon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but especially in some of those, like in that really close quarters combat, that you only have 69 killed out of almost 1,200 men.
So there's a confusion.
Obviously, right? You're in the smoke and everything, and you're that close, and you can't land a kill shot like that. To me, is really amazing. But again, I've never been in Civil War combat, so I have no idea what it's really like.
So I'll tell a story from Pickett's Charge from Archer's Brigade,
Prize
Brigade. Yeah. So obviously the men march off mid-afternoon of July 3rd, and they're going in. And, it's this grand spectacle of war, to the extent. And what Charlie was talking about, the undulations of the land, and Ed Barrs talked about, he's like, there's some parts of Pickett's Charge you'd be as safe as a babe in a mother's arms. He talked about that. Ed did a great presentation. Yeah. And as the men go across, Archer's Brigade, which I'm going to refer to in that, even though Archer's not part of it, they strike that angle.
Right.
And, the color bearers are going to suffer terribly in the fight, and they're going to lose a lot of their colors in Pickett's Charge. And one of the best accounts that's written is from a guy named Junius Kimball from the 14th Tennessee Infantry, and he talks about going to the corner of the angle, and now there's a large tree there now,
right? And
he talks about putting his musket there and taking dead aim at a Union soldier on the other side of the stone wall and firing. And he misses. And the guy doesn't go down. So he reloads and he shoots at him again, and he misses again. Oh, and he says, damn him, I couldn't make the shot, or whatever. And eventually, of course, and that's probably where he stopped. If he went further, he's probably going to get captured or casualty.
Yeah, he would.
But eventually, he sees that the battle is kind of the way that it's going, and he turns around and leaves. And in a very memorable moment, he then realizes, like, well, if I've got my back to the enemy, they're going to shoot me in the back, and then that's going to be a dishonorable way to die. So he turns around and then he walks backward across Pickett's Charge. So if he gets shot, he's going to get shot in the front.
Yeah, facing his enemy.
Yeah,
facing the enemy there. So
that's the kind of esprit de corps they had.
Yeah, definitely. But they lose a lot of their colors there, and over half of the brigade becomes a casualty. And really that's sort of the end for Archer's Brigade as an effective fighting force as we think about it within the Army of Northern Virginia.
So what happens to what remains? Are they absorbed into other units, or do they remain as Archer's Brigade, or what happens?
So Archer eventually he's initially sent to Union prisoner of war camp in the Great Lakes area, and then the Confederate Johnson Island. There's a concern about Confederates shelling Fort Delaware, which is on the eastern seaboard. So they move a lot of Confederate prisoners to kind of utilize as human shields, move him to Fort Delaware, and he's stationed there. He's exchanged in 1964, but his health is ruined from his time there with in the Union prisoner of war camp. He returns to the brigade for a time, but he eventually dies, and he's actually buried in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. Right. Yeah. The Confederate Army, they basically different opinions and approaches to it, but so Archer's Brigade remains in effect, and they just sort of kind of continue. I mean, it's a unit, but they continue to consolidate them with the other units, and they try to put more men into existing regiments. The Union Army takes a different approach. They just create new regiments because that's more political patronage you can pass around. And, got more colonels.
Absolutely.
Lincoln's trying to get reelected as president, so he's got some concerns with that. But as an effective fighting force, they basically have come to, they fight through the remainder of the war, but whenever Appomattox rolls around, it's just a handful of men that surrender.
Yeah, they were on the southern line in Petersburg.
Yeah.
Out in the trenches there.
Yeah.
What's left of them.
Right.
All right. Well, let me say this, Matt. It's a shame you had studied for it, but you didn't take the guide exam, and it's too bad you didn't take it, because I think if you would have passed, you would have made a great guide. You did a great job here.
Well, thank you.
You have a very good bedside manner, if you will. And but I enjoyed having you on here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break, and we'll come back with questions from our patrons that were submitted because they were tipped off ahead of time that this was happening. And patrons are in the know. And that's over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. We'll be right back after these words.
That's another great question.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com.
When you're dragging ass out of bed, the hair's mussed up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Ground Top Road.
Oh, Little Ground Top. Have you tried Little Ground Top yet, Charlie?
No, I haven't.
Do you like coffee?
I do.
I'll have to get you a bag of Little Ground Top because it's just delicious.
Okay.
It's our first, but we're of many coffees that is made through Bantam Roasters right across from the Dobbin House over there.
Oh,
you know where I'm talking?
Yeah, I know. I've been there before.
And it is delicious. It's taking the world by storm. Listen to this crazy number. Ready? 132,000 people. Let me repeat it. 132,000 people have yet to buy a bag. But someday they will. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Someday they will.
Impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive. So anyway, Little Ground Top, let me tell you a little bit about it, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never heard of this wonderful coffee here. You can get it in whole bean or you can ground it to your coffee making specifications. It has, first of all, it's a medium blend, okay? So if you care about whether it's light, medium, dark, there you go, it's medium. But it's got notes of cacao, wildflowers, and toasted sugar. And I also detect a little bit of black pepper, but not everybody agrees. Not everybody has the sophisticated palate that I do.
True.
So when you're in town, you stop at Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue, and you can get a bag, or you can order it at addressinggettysburg.com/cafe. And I gotta give you a warning: when it's on the shelves, it's not there for very long. They put them up Friday, and usually by Sunday they're gone. So if you're coming into town for the weekend, make sure you get there Friday night, Saturday morning, so that you can get your bag. Or, you know what? Order online, addressinggettysburg.com/cafe. You can even subscribe to it so that every month they'll charge you and you'll get your order in the mail automatically. You don't even need to worry about it. I'm telling you, you're going to love it, ladies and gentlemen. Even if you're not a coffee drinker, get it for the coffee drinker and Getty's nerd in your family. And no one will ever be unhappy again. That's 82 Steinware Avenue in Gettysburg or addressinggettysburg.com/cafe.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
All right, and we are back now, and we have our questions from our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. But first, we have a phone call. This is a gentleman named Jeff. Jeff, you're on the air. Jeff is slowly waking up.
He needs some of that coffee.
Jeff,
I had my afternoon Little Ground Top, Matt, so my pick-me-up is getting in there, and I can taste the hint of black pepper.
You can. Okay, so you have a sophisticated palate like I do, and you can also taste the black pepper. Thank you for that, Jeff. Thank you. Everybody thinks I'm crazy.
Of course.
Well, they should.
They should.
Well...
Okay.
Debatable.
We don't need to belabor that point. But what's your question, Jeff?
So my question was, after Archer gets tagged out by Doubleday in the first inning, I was wondering, do we have any idea of, like, I've wondered when they've captured him, like, where would he have been taken to in Gettysburg? Would he have been around for the Pickett Pettigrew Trimble charge? Would he know that his brigade made that valiant charge against Angle?
I don't know that he would have known necessarily that his men were in the charge unless he was in a place where he could see those colors. And he could see the battle honors and recognize that's the 14th Tennessee, that's the 13th Alabama that's coming across that field. But he would have definitely been here. I'm not sure where they would have held a Confederate officer prisoner. I mean, they may have taken him to one of the farms that's behind Union lines at that point. I mean, it could have been, he probably wouldn't have been at the Widow Leicester house or anywhere like that. That would have been on, close to where the action was taking place at the angle. But he definitely would have still been on the battlefield proper and would have known that the battle was still going on.
By the way, Susan Wall submitted a very similar question, so I'll just read that now since you just answered it. Where was Archer located when he was captured, and what percentage of his command was captured on July 1st? So she was saying where he was going, but where was he captured? We did cover that, but July 1st.
July 1st, they're going to be captured along Willoughby Run. Right. They're just in front of Herbst Woods. That's where, whenever the Iron Brigade flanks those two exposed regiments of Archer's Brigade, that's where the men from July 1 are going to be captured. Archer's captured in a thicket there I believe along those banks of Willoughby's Run, probably somewhere in that general vicinity.
Okay. Anything else, Jeff?
No, I did have another question about about his time in prison, but you guys had already kind of covered that. My question would have been if he, being part of going to prison, if he ever wrote home about it. I think I was reading something about he had written Jefferson Davis trying to get him to help them escape possibly when he was up near Lake Erie.
How would that letter have gotten to him? Wouldn't they have read that mail? You would hope.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Right?
May not have been like the correction officers up here in New York State.
It's probably asking to be exchanged, if anything.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably what he's doing.
All right. Well, thank you for
That's all I had. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Okay. It looks like now our buddy John B. has a question. John, you are on the air, sir.
Hello. Got a question. How long of a time are we talking about that Archer's Brigade would have been at the angle? Are we talking 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or shorter?
They wish.
I mean, it was, so the whole Pickett's charge, approximately 50 minutes, Charlie.
Yes.
Is that what we think? So, I mean, that's from them stepping out from the woods on Seminary Ridge to Lee coming out saying it's all my fault. And, obviously seeing the wreckage of the fight. As far as how much time they're going to be there at the angle, I mean, that's anybody's guess, but very brief, most likely. Yeah. I mean, that's at that point, it's somewhat of a meat grinder. And the men that go, in my opinion, if you go to where the Lewis Armistead marker is now within the angle, if you get over that stone wall, past that marker, you're either a casualty or I don't know that there's many men coming out of that scenario. So just
killed,
I think,
wounded, or captured.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean,
Archer was Armistead was all three.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
So I think 5-10 minutes at the most is probably in real time.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Anything else, John?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Charlie reminded me how much smoke there would have been on that day. Now the brigade behind them would have been Lawrence's brigade. Would they have even been able to see the melee that was going on, or would they have just been walking into straight smoke from the Archer's Brigade area?
That's a good question. I think they would see some of it because by the time they get close to the wall, most people are swinging guns.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's less smoke, but there's still enough to obscure some vision. But there's an account of the 14th Connecticut that they could see Archer's men coming, and they could see the flags coming. And I think they got 6. Now, I don't know how many of them are Archer's Brigade, but they managed to grab 6 flags. So they could see that. So I think you have less smoke there at that moment.
How many flags?
Okay.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, the 14th Connecticut got 6.
6 flags?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What a great adventure.
And that smoke across the line is a big deal, right? Like I can think of Wilcox's brigade marker. They mentioned the fact that they lose sight of Pickett's division because of that smoke.
Right.
They end up by themselves up there.
And there's been this huge cannonade too that's preceded all this as well. So there's already a lot of smoke.
There's a lot of smoke to begin with.
Exactly. And the Confederates score that hit on the Union artillery wagon, which they sort of say, okay, this is when we're going to, go forward with this. It was more symbolic probably than anything else. It made a bigger boom than what actually affected military changes. So, I mean, you think that's got to send a lot of smoke and debris into the air too.
Am I mistaken in that it was a windless day?
Yes,
and it was humid.
Yeah.
Humid.
So that smoke is not going away.
It's not moving
off. Not going away.
Yeah, there's the local citizen who keeps track of all the
Jacobs,
weather.
That's
Michael Jacobs. Yeah. All right, John. Thank you for the call, sir.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And we've got one more in the queue there. Stay there, Harry. I just want to get this question in here. I'm going to kind of mix and mingle them in. J.D. Hewitt, of course, the great J.D. Hewitt, he says, I've seen multiple references to Archer's bad health. Do we know much about what his health problems were?
You want to take it?
Yeah, so I know he had tuberculosis.
Right, he got it, yeah.
Is this prior to the battle, or is he talking after he's captured?
I never came across any accounts that he had any major medical conditions.
No,
before
he's wounded prior to the Battle of Gettysburg.
Right.
But other than that, I don't know that he's got. I don't think he was suffering from TB or consumption is what they would have called it then. But I don't think he was suffering from that prior going to the POW camp.
He contracted that at Johnson Island.
Right. So
that's on Lake Erie.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think exposure to the elements plus him contracting TB, I think that's really what ruined his health.
Yeah. Okay. Because the reason why is there's a follow-up question. Also, did this lead to his ultimate death, or was this more of a result of his time as POW at Fort Delaware? So it kind of makes me.
Yeah, and it's probably worse at Johnson's Island. Is probably where he had the worst experience because he's he goes through the winter of '63 there, dealing with all of that, and then he gets exchanged in '64, and then that's when he gets moved to Delaware, which is a little bit more of a temperate climate. So I mean, both places terrible places to be. I'm confident, but I think probably. Johnson's Island is worse. Yeah.
The second question he has is, I've also read that James Archer's brother Robert was his aide de camp. It was also captured during the Gettysburg campaign. Do we know much about the circumstances surrounding his capture and imprisonment?
Go ahead.
I don't know a whole lot about it other than I mean I know he survives the war. So Robert lives until 1878, I think, and I think he gets involved in politics. Maybe
he does. Yeah.
So all I know is he lived through it. And
I guess the question would be: is he captured on the 1st or the 3rd?
I think he's captured with Archer on the 1st.
I think so too.
I think they were together when they got captured, which would make sense because they're probably, as his aide de camp, he's probably trying to rally the troops and getting some orders from Archer, his brother.
All right, Harry, you're on the air.
I was wondering what was his relationship with Lee and the other upper tier command after the battle.
Who, Archer, you're saying?
Archer.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's still good. I mean, they make it a point to try to get him exchanged. I mean, they're working hard to.
Do you know who he was exchanged for? I used to know that, and I can't remember.
I can't remember now either.
Yeah, I have to look it up. But anyway, they're trying to get him back.
Right?
Can you Google that, Mikey? Thank you, Mikey.
Yeah, he's a good commander.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had the confidence of Lee and Jackson. Yeah. Obviously, Jackson's gone by 63 at this point, but I mean, I think he had won the admiration of the Confederate High Command.
Sure,
it was
undefeated,
right
until
then.
Gettysburg.
So I think he had a good relationship with. I mean, that's. And if Robert E. Lee didn't like you in command, he would send you out west or find some other job for you.
Yeah, go to Texas.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. All right, Harry, anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Harry. Have a good one.
Thanks, Harry.
Okay. Joe Denise says, how wooded was the area of the fighting by Willoughby Run and the quarry during the battle versus how it is today? And did that play a part in helping or hurting Archie's brigade? I think he meant Archer's brigade.
Archie's a cartoon character.
That's right. What do you...
I'm going to say it's not as wooded as it is today.
Right.
So if you go to Reynolds Woods, and you stand at where Reynolds fell, and you look to your left and right, and see how open the woods are. That's how open they were, all the way down to Willoughby Run, all the way down to the quarry. Okay, and we have photographs of those woods, and there's a painting there now showing Reynolds. There's no undergrowth, mostly mature trees, and so you can see through them.
There's also that, I think it's a Matthew Brady shot taken from the McPherson farm towards the seminary, and you can see a little bit of the woods, and you can see right through them.
You see right through them. Yeah.
So how did the woods go all the way down to and across Willoughby Run like they do today? Is the tree line essentially the same?
They're more extensive today.
There's more today.
Yeah, but they did go down to the run.
They did.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit across.
When you go a little south of that position there to like across from the Harmon Farm, stuff like where Biddle's brigade was, down along the creek there, would that have been as wooded as it is today?
No, it would have brush. You would have brush because they don't have weed whackers.
Right.
So they let the brush grow along the runs. And that's what did Archer in, trying to get through the brush. Yeah, but they wouldn't have mature trees down there. They cut them down.
So when you're thinking of that section from Caliph, thank you. From Caliph's battery over there early on in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to see what we can't now because of those trees.
You come now.
Yeah.
You want to see what they saw, you come now.
Right. When there's no leaves.
Don't wait till May.
Right.
It's over.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Rob Fry. Hold on here 1 second. Let's talk to this person here. They did not give their name. I think I know who it is, though, because it's the only international call we ever get. Everybody's favorite elf, Grant.
Yes, sir.
I don't know. You called me. What do you want?
I would like to ask a question, sir.
All right, go ahead. He's pretending to be somebody. Go ahead, Grant. What's your question?
My question is, could Archer have done anything differently to avoid capture? Is there a place or an area near the thicket in Willoughby's Run that could he avoid a capture, or was it inevitable that with his condition, being exhausted, sick, all of that, it was going to happen anyway?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen anyway. The only way he could have avoided capture if he listened to Pettigrew when they marched out.
That's what I was about to say. Don't get your regiments flanked.
But once he gets in there, he's done.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, once that Iron Brigade gets on his flanks of those regiments, it's a bad deal. So there's no rabbit hole, I don't think, big enough for him to crawl in.
No. Not a guy with a sword.
Yeah, right. Anything else, Grant?
I'd just like to second my praise for Little Ground Top. What a coffee.
Have you ordered it and had it sent to Australia?
I've tried to import it naturally, but apparently customs officials here in Australia have high standards, so they couldn't let it in.
Well, listen, Grant, when you come here in April, I will make sure you go home with a couple of bags, okay?
You need one of those substandard coffee mules, Grant.
Yeah. You need a coffee mule. Did you know Grant has his own song?
Does he?
Oh.
Watching a dress in Gettysburg. He picks up the phone, hears a dial tone. Dials and gets down to his work. Woo! La, 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 la. Grant makes fun of Matt. La, la,
Yeah.
la, la, la. Calls him bald and fat. La, 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 la. He tries to make Matt cry, but he never wins, 'cause Matt's an awesome guy.
Awesome guy.
Thank you, Cool in the Gang. All right. Anything else, Grant? Is that it?
I appreciate the gesture of coffee when I get to Gettysburg, but I don't want to be in worse condition than Archer. So,
Grant, I don't make the coffee, so you're insulting somebody else there while you're trying to insult me. You understand?
yeah, that's the whole point.
All right, Grant. Listen.
And before I sign off, I'll
Not
just
soon
say
enough.
thank you to Charlie, and McClanahan's done well.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
he has.
agree.
Grant, I
I
appreciate
agree.
that.
Yes,
Thank you.
very
Thank
good.
you, thank you.
You're very welcome.
We're going to drag him back again.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, Matt.
We need
Sarah,
a southern
Grant. See you later.
perspective around here.
We do. Rob Fry asks, are there any sources or thoughts on what illness he was inflicted? Okay, so we did talk about that one.
Yeah.
The second question is, even though his brigade was made up of troops from both Tennessee and Alabama, were any of the rank and file troops upset with being led by a Marylander, and did that not matter to them? Or did that not matter to them? We kind of flirted with that earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Initially, they did have a Tennessean leading the brigade, and then he's killed during the Peninsula campaign. I think that to the extent that they had some reservations about being commanded by someone from not Tennessee or Alabama, I think that he quickly won their respect. So it seems like all the men appreciated Archer, and they respected his authority, and were glad to serve with him.
I agree.
Okay. Brian Jackson, our final questionnaire tonight, or is a questioner. The guy who's asking the last question is Brian Jackson. He says, even when you take the 6th Wisconsin and the Brigade Guard out of the numbers for the Iron Brigade, they still outnumber Archer's brigade and had better ground to defend. Why was Archer's brigade caught off guard, and pushed the attack rather than trying to find out exactly what was in front of them. This tends to be my question with Heath's attack on McPherson's Ridge in general. They didn't seem to send out skirmishers or try to recon any of their front. Well, but they did have, Archer did have skirmishers.
Yeah, he did.
But what was the deal with it? Were they not far enough ahead for it to matter, or did they not discover what's going on there?
I mean, I think it was just a very fluid situation. Sure. And I think that it just changed much more rapidly than what they were able to gather information. I think initially they think they're fighting militia. They realize, well, we've got some cavalry here with the Army of the Potomac. And then before you know it, they're tangling with half the Union Army.
Oh, yeah.
Henry Heath would say, right?
That's right.
So I think that's kind of what happened. An intelligence failure for the Army of Northern Virginia, I think, is what the problem.
And that's true. And the visibility is another fact.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't see the other regiments, the Iron Brigade, coming up until it was too late.
Right.
My boys got the dander up.
They got the dander.
Yeah, they got their dander up too. You can't argue with that, right?
That's right.
Any books that you recommend on the topic?
So Randall Bishop has a book called The Tennessee Brigade. It focuses on Archer's Brigade during the American Civil War. June Kimball's got some really neat reminiscences. After the war, he moves to Texas, and I think he was a source for Ken Burns in the Civil War. And there's a lot of publications that have utilized him. So I'd recommend those two.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, very good.
Yep.
Well, Matt, Charlie, thank you very much. Great job, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Thank you to Charlie.
Thank you.
Let me just say, it's an honor to sit next to a living legend, Charlie Fennell, man.
He was very thrilled.
I love his opportunity.
Sometimes I don't look like I'm living, but I'm still here. Thank you, Matt.
Matt was very thrilled when he heard that we were pairing him up with you.
Okay.
Yeah, so we
can do it again sometime.
Sounds good.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, really. Anytime you want to come on and do this again, Matt, that would be quite all right with me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. Yeah. And here's a final thought for everybody from Charlie.
Hello, Dolly. Hello, Dolly.
Otherwise, that's it for us, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mikey, in the back for your help there, your assistance. Did you Google that last thing? Did you get an answer?
Yeah, all my great sources like Wikipedia and stuff like that came up with nothing. No, I looked into it online. I couldn't find anything. American Battlefield Trust. No one has anything about who he was exchanged for, per se.
Okay. All right, very good. That's it for us, folks. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, for your patronage, for everything else, and all your support, and we will talk to you next time.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneer's initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down